Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Microsoft Flight Simulator, and today we are back with the PMDG 737 tutorial guide coming out of DFW and heading over to Colorado Springs. And today upon landing we'll be reviewing the Autoland. If you are interested in acquiring any of my Overkill's tutorial guides for Microsoft Flight Simulator, please consider joining me on Patreon. Patreon subscribers level tier 2 and above have access to all of my guides, as well as any future updates and future guides that will be coming down the road. Link to Patreon can be found in the description below. Alright folks, so as you saw in the intro, if you didn't skip it, here's another announcement here. I do have an Overkill's PMDG 737 tutorial guide that is a full flight tutorial that has absolutely every piece of documentation and setting that you need in order to complete the flight within the guide. You don't need to go to SimBrief, you don't need to go to Navigraph, you don't need to go anywhere else. Absolutely everything that you need to plot this flight is included in this guide. Includes a full cockpit tour, systems tour, as well as displays tours, and then obviously full procedural startup from cold and dark to cold and dark shutdown at our destination. If you're interested in this guide or any of my guides as said in the intro, please consider joining me on Patreon. Alright, so let's go ahead and just jump right into it. We're going to get moving. Now I'm going to be going through a lot of the processes pretty fast. Please keep in mind, guys, there are other PMDG 737 tutorial guides on my channel. So if you guys are interested in a slow and steady tutorial pace up until Autoland, please consider watching one of those videos. I'll try to remember to put a link or a card up on the video, although I always forget the cards, which is really dumb of me, but I do. So let's get up top. All right, so working our flow down here, we want to make sure the battery is turned on and guarded. Emergency exit lights are also armed. Standby power is closed and guarded. Electric hydraulic pumps are off. And ground power, if available, we can now turn on. And make sure our wipers are both in the park position. Moving down to the cockpit for just a quick moment here, or the flight deck. Make sure your landing gear handle is down. You have 3 green indicating. Always double check that the rear panel is also matching the front panel, and there it is right there on the overhead. Moving over just a bit, let's find a better camera here. I gotta remember where my cameras are. Make sure that your flap indication is reading the up position and the flap handle matches what you are indicating. While we're here, let's move back just a little bit and do our fire tests. So we're going to start with the in-op and fault alarm. Moving over to the overheat and fire test. This one gets a little noisy. Stepping on over to the extinguisher bottles, check the left side and the right side. 3 green indicating the bottles are good and ready for discharge. And finally, do a cargo fire heat test. All right. Easy peasy pumpkin something. Backing up here for just a quick second, you do want to make sure that the manual gear release door is down. If you see here, you can click here and open this up. You drop these 3 handles and the landing gear will extend using gravitational force if memory serves. However, please keep in mind that once you pull those, the landing gear can no longer be retracted. So close that door, give it a quick stomp. And then finally, you're also going to peek up overhead, if I can get the right camera view. Come on, baby. Turn over. There we go. And make sure your emergency escape rope is secure, and all circuit breakers on both the first officer and pilot side are secure as well and functioning. All right, with that in mind, let's step to the overhead panel, and we will continue our testing. There we go. Let's start with the flight recorder here. We're going to open that guy up, flip it on over to test. The off light should extinguish, and then close it back and get it back into the normal position. Give me just a second. I feel like you guys have absolutely no audio unless I'm losing my mind. Maybe we have it. There we go. Okay, now I can hear it. I had my audio down. So there's mock airspeed test number 1. There's number 2. Complete the same with the stall warning. This should activate the shaker. Now, I have seen where this can take a minute or 2 before it functions. So I'll tell you what, we're going to come back to this one here. While we're here, we're going to move over to our IRS knobs and move them into the align position, or excuse me, nav position, pass align. And let's try the stall test one more time. All right, so we'll just have to remember to come back here in just a minute. Let's go down to the flight deck again. Take a look at our lights test. Basically anything with a light bulb should light up. Make it look like a big old Christmas tree in here. All right, stepping back in, clear the... Oh, never mind, don't clear the master caution. Turn the lights test off. And finally, our last step here for pre-check is going to be testing our oxygen. You should see the Doppler here open up, indicating that oxygen is passing through it. Just a quick tap on it, and you'll know that you are good to go. We can clear the FMC alert there for just a moment. Let's try the stall warning one more time. I've had issues in the past where sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Let's give it a shot. Still no stall test. That is very interesting. I'll have to figure out what's going on. Sometimes it works great. Like you fire it right up, fire the electrical power, you can go straight to the stall test and it rattles and shakes the shakers. And then sometimes I get that behavior. So it is what it is. Let's move down to the FMC and get our payload entered into the aircraft for today. And again, I am pulling this all right from the guide, so it's very, very simple. We're going to go to FS actions. We'll come back to the enter IRS position. Let's clear that. And we're going to go fuel, and the total fuel for our flight today is going to be 1520.7. Drop that in there. And this is in pounds. And then we're going to go back, and we're going to go to our payload. And passengers for today, what did we have? We have 119 souls on board. So we have 8 on first class. 107 back there. That takes us to 115. We need 111 up front. Or I should say in the back. Excuse me. Okay. And finally, our cargo should be looking at 3250 on both front and rear. So there's the forward. For a total of 6,500 pounds. All right. Moving right along. Now let's go back to the main menu. Now, here's the thing about what we just did. What we just did is we loaded the aircraft instantly. So there is no passenger boarding. There isn't any refueling necessary. It just sets it up instantly. And I do that for the sake of the tutorials to save time. If this was a cinematic, obviously we'd go through the processes, but that's not what we're doing today. So now we're going to go to FMC. Nav data is showing out of date. However, it will be current for this flight, although that tells me I do need to update it. By the way, the easiest way to update your Navigraph or air rack information for the PMDG 737 is using the Navigraph data manager. The PMDG 737 for Microsoft Flight Simulator will be listed. So it updates the aircraft independently, not the simulator. So let's go ahead and move on over to position here. Well, real quick, we have the model 737-700. We have our engine ratings right now. They're at maximum 24,000 pounds of thrust. Our current air rack cycle 2205 is valid from May 19th to June 16th of 2022. So this expired 2 days ago. And the current FMC operating system program version number. All right, so let's go over to position initialization. I do apologize if I'm going too fast for some of you guys. Please feel free to back it up and recheck some things. Again, I am trying to zip through this. For the set IRS position, honestly, you have two options, okay? If you want to do it the authentic way, I'll show you in just a second. If you want to do it the cheat way, I'll show you that too. So first, the way that we are supposed to do it, based on the information we have, you hit next page, you copy this line right here, GPS left. I don't know why we don't use right, but we always use left. However, if you take note of this number, 3254.49702.1, go back to the previous page. It is the exact same thing. Oh, maybe not. Maybe was that 54? Oh, there is a slight difference. 3254.3. So slight difference. So you could probably just copy this down and bring it here. But in that case, let's go ahead and grab this one. Copies it down to the scratch pad. But I have used this line before and had absolutely no issue whatsoever. Reference, airport reference gate, that's totally up to you. Although every time I try to type in a reference gate, I get a not in database error. So I don't do that anymore. And the reference airport, we're going to be entering it anyway in a minute. And that's actually going to come up right now when we go to the route page. We are starting out at Kilo Delta Foxtrot Whiskey. Where are you? There you are. Throwing that up there. And we are heading over to Colorado Springs. We're going to throw that in there. I don't even remember what flight number I picked today, so we're just going to throw one in here and drop that one in as well. And from here, we are going to go to the next page, and you can see there is nothing here. The reason why is we need to first set up our departures, then we'll set up our arrivals, and then we can set up our route that is in between. And actually, we should go departures, route, arrivals. So let's go to the departures page, and that's just right here on the FMC, or the FMC? Yeah, this would be FMC. You'll hear me say MCDU because I'm used to the Airbus, but we're going to go Dallas-Fort Worth departures. And today we are departing on, and actually, you know what? I did update the flight plan for today because we're using live weather today, so I do need to double check that. Nope, we are still using the Logan 8, so that's good because that matches the guide. And just to show you guys real quick where I'm grabbing that from, this is our SimBrief flight plan that I created today. But again, you do not have to do this. If you follow the guide step by step, we actually don't use live weather in the guide for that reason. But here's the Logan 8. We're going to Rolls. From Rolls, we're jumping onto the Juliet 52 airway, then going to Lima Bravo Lima, going direct to Lamar. From Lamar, jumping onto the Aussie 5 arrival into the approach for Colorado Springs runway 13. Okay, so let's clear that off the screen. There's our Logan 8. There's Rolls. And we are designated for 17 right today. Select that. And we're good to go. Go back to our route page. And there it is right there. Remember, this page was previously blank, so now we have the next section. Now, remember, from Rolls, we're jumping onto the Juliet 52, going to Label or Label. I don't know which one this one is. I have to go down and look, and I don't feel like doing that. Plus, it's more fun for me to guess and get them wrong, quite frankly. You guys should hear some of the names I come up with. Juliet 52, airways always on the left, waypoints on the right. So Juliet 52 is our airway. We're going to drop that in. Then we're going to Lima Bravo Lima, dropping that in there. And remember, from Lima Bravo Lima, we're going direct to Lamar, which is LAA. Anytime you have a direct, you do not need to enter a airway or anything on the left-hand side. We're just going to type Lima Alpha Alpha. Drop that in. Now we have multiple to select here. Now typically you can usually, determine just by reading them and reading their position where you're going. It's like this one is obviously very, very far away. Let's see here. This one is a VOR frequency. But the easiest way to do it is honestly just to go back to your flight plan. If you use SimBrief, if you go to your SimBrief flight plan, scroll down to the detailed flight list. Here's all of our waypoints here. Like there's the Logan 8 that we entered, and then all of these waypoints are part of the Logan 8. So it knows to track those as we go through. Okay, there's our top of climb from Logan 8. There's Rolls. So this is the position where we're going to leave the Logan 8. From Logan 8, there's our Juliet 52. Going to Liberal is the name of that one. From Liberal, we're going direct to Lamar, and this is what we're interested in, and what you want is right here. Okay, you want your northern and western coordinates. So if we match those up, it should be the top one. Let's see here. I usually just use the Westing 10224 or 10241 and 10241. Yep, that's our guy right here. So we're just going to drop that in. That part is complete. And from here, we'll be jumping on to the star if memory serves, and we are indeed. So at this point, we're going to go back to departures and arrivals. Make sure you select your destination airport, because notice there's an arrival for both sides on our departure airport, or excuse me, arrival and a departure on our departure airport. That was a mouthful. And then so we're going to select Colorado Springs. Remember, we're coming in on the Aussie 5. There's Lamar, Lamar. And we are expecting runway 13. So let's use our next page and find our runway. You know what, though? That's actually not going to work for me because we are doing an Autoland, so I need ILS. So I'll tell you what we're going to do to solve that problem as well. We're going to go to Navigraph and just change it. We don't have to go back through creating the flight plan, all that jazz. We're just going to find what we need. So let's go to Navigraph for a second. Let's bring that down so you guys can see everything. Why is that so limited? That was weird. Oh, I see what's going on. All right. I have the top of the browser page cut off, it looks like. There we go. Okay, so let's find Colorado Springs, KCOS. And again, even the star chart is included in the PDF guide. And we're going to go to the book. Although I do highly recommend you guys get... oh, no, we want approaches. And so let's see, actually, we can look at this. So, actually, coming in on the Aussie 5 star, we should be expecting ILS 17 left or 17 right. So if we go to our approaches... Well, actually, let's do this. Let's go to the airport diagram first. Wrong one. So there's 17 left. There's 17 right. We're going to be coming in this way. Here's the terminal. Let's grab 17 right. I think that's going to be a lot easier today. So now we're going to go to our approaches. We're going to select 17 right. Well, that's an RNAV, though. 17 left it is. That answers that question. And it only supports Cat 1 and Cat 2. Well, shoot. We want a Cat 3 approach is what we want. Cat 2 should still work with Autoland, so we'll just select the Cat 2. And there we go. All right, and it is the exact same approach. All right, cool. So the good news is that didn't change anything. Whoa, what happened there? I didn't even know you could do that. Huh. Okay. So, click that off the screen. Just a real quick refresher to make sure we had everything right there. And 17 left is our target today. So we're going to go 17 left. Our transition point, as we saw on the chart, is addon. Hopefully I say that correctly. We select it. Now we go to our route page, and here we go. So from Logan 8 to Rolls, from Rolls to the Juliet 52, onto Liberal, from Liberal direct to Lamar, from Lamar jumping onto the Aussie 5 to addon, from addon jumping onto the approach, and getting onto the ILS 17 left for runway 17 left. And the missed approach takes us back to addon. At this point, we can now hit activate. Go to our legs page. The only thing I like to do here is go to the legs page and make sure that we don't have any discontinuities. Now, if you want to double check your flight, what you can do here, well, actually, plan is what I wanted. I just didn't mean to rotate it quite that fast, is you can check your plan. So here's our current aircraft. Here's 17 right. We're going to be coming out this way. So if I just move our mouse down just a little bit, and we can hit the step button here. Actually, I can get a little closer for you guys, I think. You can step through each point of the flight. And again, here we're looking for any breaks in the flight plan, any breaks in that big giant gaps in that blue line. So here is addon. Okay. We're making that turn around. There's the initial fix for the approach. There's our landing on 17 left. If for any reason we miss that, execute the missed approach, back to addon, and back through the approach line. Okay, easy stuff there. And if we hit execute, notice that we also get our altitude restrictions, which you can verify on the chart for the approach plate. Same thing with the departure plate as well. I can tell you that I have obviously gone through this multiple times at this point. Trust me, they're right. So let's go ahead and continue onward with the rest of the aircraft setup. Let's step back down for the FMC. We're done with our route. Let's go back to the route page. Now we're going to go to performance initialization. Okay, now, if for any reason you were not already fueled, I would recommend waiting until you're fueled. There is some math you can do to skip a few things, but trust me, it's much easier to just wait if you're learning, okay? And we'll talk about the manual entry while you're fueling later on and things that you have to do, but that will be at a much later video. So, cost index. We're going to pull that directly from our SimBrief flight plan. Let me get down to the right page here. We went through quite a bit. So, scrolling through our tutorial doc here. There's the route, there's the arrival, and performance initialization. All right, so let's see what we got here. So, for today, our cost index is going to be 32. Final reserves on our beautiful flight today is going to be 5.0. And 0 fuel weight for today. We can just give that a click and then click it again. Calculates everything. And our cruise altitude today, although I am going to actually verify that on the new flight plan to make sure that's still correct. Flight level 380. That sounds wrong going that way, but maybe it's right. I can't remember. I always get them mixed up. So there's that. Now, for a cruise wind, today we are going to go back to the flight plan I created because, again, we're using live weather. So for our cruise and wind, what we need to do is go back to our detailed flight route, and we're going to find our top of climb. That's TOC. Okay, this is when we should reach our cruise altitude. And we're going to enter this information right here. That's winds 238 at 12 knots is what we're expecting up there. So again, let's take that off the screen. And we're looking for 238/12 for 12 knots. Drop that in there. Transition altitude in the United States, always 18,000 feet. We are done with the performance page. Moving over to N1 limit, we are going to leave that right now still at the max D rate, so 24,000 pounds. Basically, the engines can operate at 95.9% maximum power, and we're going to leave that as is. Reason being is because, again, I need to learn far more about how to select the D rate properly and how to calculate the assumed outside temperature. And that's something we'll get into it later. If you guys have any great resources on that information, I would greatly appreciate it. I prefer some sort of written documentation that I can study, but if somebody feels like typing it out or shoot me an email, please, I would be absolutely thrilled if you can give me some very detailed information on how that is all calculated and determined. That would really help me a lot, and then help everyone else who watches the videos. But for now, we're going to just go TOGA, which is maximum power. We're going to leave the engines at their maximum rating, which is 95.9%. So we're going to skip this page, basically, and go right to takeoff. Takeoff, we are going to be using flaps 5 today. You would only really be using flaps 10 if you were on a very, very wet surface, maybe a very short runway and very heavy loaded. Then you might go for flaps 10 to get off the ground a bit sooner. Center of gravity at this point, we can go ahead and give that a tap. 24.8% is our center of gravity, and our trim, take note of that. We're going to need that here in just a minute. We're looking for 5 degrees of nose up. Calculate our V speeds. We have V1, the speed at which the takeoff must now continue. There's no longer enough runway left to safely stop the aircraft. Rotation speed, the speed at which we begin pulling the nose back. And V2, in the event of a single engine loss, as long as we have reached 134 knots, the aircraft will continue to accelerate and climb. Okay, so good stuff. That is basically it. The only thing that we need to do is come down here to our trim wheel. And for this one, I do recommend giving yourself a pretty good camera view because it can be a little weird. Whoa, not that high. Sorry. But maybe like something like this. In the next PMDG update, the trim wheel animation should be resolved. So that's going to be pretty cool. It should match what we would expect to see. And there's right about 5 degrees. You don't have to be right on it. You just want to be close. All right, and we got our total weight up here. Fuel on both sides, 7.6 thousand pounds. FMC configuration is complete. We can go back to the legs page. We have our initial waypoint already set. It is time to continue on with the aircraft configuration. So let me catch up on our guide here. We want to go step by step so you guys can see what's going on here. Alrighty then, let's move upstairs. Yoink. Okay, so stepping on down the line, we're just going to sort of go through a flow of the systems from top to bottom, left to right. So first off, the yaw damper is on your navigation panel. You want to make sure all switches are in the normal position. Display source, ideally you want to keep that on the auto position, and control panels to normal. Crossfeed, you're going to give that a quick test. The light should turn very, very blue, go dim like it just did. Turn it back, goes back to a high blue, and then it should extinguish. Fuel pumps at this point can come on as the aircraft is fully fueled and ready to go. And let me keep you guys up to date here. We're going to go up to the top here and sort of work our way down. We are currently on ground power, but we can go ahead and set the meter to the APU as we're going to be starting it momentarily. That way we can track the power. Make sure the galley power is on as we did before. Make sure your standby power is still covered and any disconnects are covered and closed. Ground power remains on for the moment. Parking switches, still want to make sure that they are still in the park position. Overhead lights set as desired. You have your circuit breaker lights and your panel lights. The panel lights will bring up the overhead panel lights. Equipment supply, or equipment cooling, I should say, excuse me, supply and exhaust should both be in the norm position. Emergency exit lights are armed and closed. Seatbelt signs, no smoking signs, and no portable devices signs, or however you want to describe it, should come to on. As long, once again, as the aircraft is completely fueled. Seatbelt signs are never turned on until the aircraft has been fueled. That way, if for any reason there is an emergency, you don't have anyone buckled in, ideally. Okay, and let's see where we are at here. Give the 10 light or 10 button a quick push. Let everyone in the cabin know that we are getting ready for engine startup. Coming back up here, window heat systems can now get turned on. The probe heats will wait for just a moment here. We're going to leave those in the off/auto position, depending on what variant of aircraft that you're flying. In this case, you can see it is in the off position. And coming on down to our electric hydraulic pumps, you can go ahead and flip those on. Wing and engine anti-ice. Unless you are in severe anti-ice or icing conditions, you don't need those on just yet. This is your door panel. It lets you know if any doors, etc., are currently open, whether it be cargo doors, entry doors, etc. If any were open, they would be illuminated. So by all of these being extinguished, we can determine that the aircraft is currently closed and sealed. Set your air conditioning system as desired. Speaking of the fan system, though, recirculation fan should be in the norm position. Left and right pack can go to the auto position. Isolation valve can remain open for the time being. APU bleed, we're going to go ahead and flip that on now. If you don't flip it on and you start the APU and try to start the engines won't start because they're not getting any bleed pressure from the APU. Here we have our cruise altitude, so we're going to set that up to 38,000 feet. And then landing elevation, I believe we are doing 6,200, excuse me. Always set this above whatever your landing elevation is if necessary. So for example, if your elevation is 6,213 feet, you would set it to 6,250. Always set above, never set below. Okay. There we go. And make sure your pressurization switch is set to the norm position, or auto, excuse me. Let's move forward just a hair. Come on. What's going on here? There we go. Come on, camera. Keep up with me. Position light should be in the steady position. Anti-collision lights can come on because we are getting, in fact, ready to start the aircraft. So we want to stay ahead of this one here. And then finally, we're going to move over to our APU start switch. Go to on, then give it another down click. Go to start. You should see the APU exhaust temperature start to rise. It's going to rise between 6 and 800 degrees and then fall back down to about 4. You should see a low oil pressure. There it is. Low oil pressure light indicating that the APU is starting. So that sort of gives you the heads up that you're getting ready here. So while that's going on, we're going to step on down to the flight control panel here, the FCP, and we're going to make sure that we turn our flight directors on. Pilot side always first. Whichever one you turn on first will be the master. So we want to make sure pilot side gets turned on first, or pilot in command, I should say, whichever side you choose to fly on, I guess, really what that comes down to. Heading, we're going to set our initial takeoff heading at 176 today for the runway heading. And just in case, I like to populate that in the course heading as well. Just in case we need to navigate via VOR. But more or less it's just sometimes I've seen pilots on different YouTube channels, and I've talked to pilots in real life who have said sometimes they'll set the courses of their first VOR or maybe their first waypoint. You know, it just really depends on what you're doing that day. Okay, so let's see where we're at here, and we'll set our initial takeoff altitude. Right now we are currently cleared for 12,000 feet. So we'll go ahead and set that. We're going to move on over here, clear the master caution, and we're going to set our barometer. Now for this, I'm just going to hit the B key today. 299.3 is what we're at, so darn near standard, so we didn't have to go very far. Auto brake right here, we're going to move that down to the RTO position, which is rejected takeoff. This is in the event that for any reason we need to abort the takeoff before V1. We're going to set our nav display up as desired. I normally do the map mode and set it between 20 and 40 nautical miles, depending on how spread out the initial waypoints are. Stepping on down, we're going to go to our system page. From the system page, you would check all of your flight controls by moving them all around, make sure that everything's responding. There's our rudders, all that good jazz, and make sure you're ready to go. The other thing that we want to do is we want to push our throttles above 40%. And we want to make sure that we hear that. Lets us know that the takeoff configuration alarm is working. The aircraft is not currently in a takeoff configuration. Flaps aren't set, trim isn't, or trim is set, but you guys get the gist. The aircraft knows that it's not ready for takeoff. It's not configured for a safe takeoff. So you want to be able to hear that. And finally now at this point, we'll go ahead and arm the parking brake and have everyone downstairs remove the wheel chocks. And coming back, almost done with our startup procedures, guys. Almost done. Want to make sure that your engine start switches are in the cutoff position. Your stabilizer trim switches are in the norm position. We're going to step back to the rear panel and we're going to set our transponder code. And really you can just make something up. In the guide we have 3507. So we'll just use that. There we go. And we want to make sure the transponder is currently in standby. And you also want to make sure your transponder and altitude source is set to 1, which is the pilot side. Make sure your trims are set to the 0 position. There's our rudder trim. aileron trim, you're actually going to find it up here on the top of the yoke. Right there. Okay, so if we were trimmed left, you would actually see the yoke. Oop, I think I clicked off screen. Oh, no, it's not going to rotate because I have it pushed down. Let me click it up. There we go. There. So if you were trimmed, for example, 2 degrees, you would actually see something like that. Okay. All right, let's get that back down there. All right, let's see where we're at here. I think we're getting ready to move on. So speaking of the chocks, we're going to come down here, go to the MCDU here. Oh, there it was, MCDU. I said it, FMC. We're going to hit menu. We're going to go to FS actions. We're going to go to ground services, and we're going to tell them to remove the wheel chocks. And it also removes ground power, which I forgot about. I'm still getting used to that. When you remove the wheel chocks, it does remove ground power, so you need to make sure that you set your APU gen now that the APU is available before you do that. I need to change that on the guide. Oh, actually, no, I skipped that step on the guide, so I deserved that one. All right. And everything else is set to go. We are now ready to set our pushback and get the aircraft out of here. Let's make sure that didn't mess anything up. Okay, yep. Operation restored. Good. Go to menu. We should go to legs. All right. Everything else is set. We should be good now. We've acknowledged the alarm. Yeah, that was totally my fault. I literally skipped that one step in my guide. So it's in the guide. I just didn't read it. Okay. So at this point, let's go ahead and plan our pushback and get out of here. I still like to use toolbar pushback. I know a lot of people still have some goofy issues with it. I really don't have much of a problem with it, so I go ahead and still use it. Plus, it's just too cool to ignore. All right, so we are going to push us back out this way. Get us lined up here. Close enough. Hit enter. Oh, wrong one. There we go. Now hit enter. Groovy. And request pushback.
Cockpit to ground. This is ground. Stand by.
And we're just waiting for permission to start the engines and we'll get them rolling. Doesn't take long at all. This really is a really cool app. I love this application.
Okay, sir. The bypass pin is installed. All doors and hatches closed and all ground equipment is removed. The parking brakes are set. You may lift. Parking brake set. Lifting the aircraft.
So again, at this point, save you guys a quick step here. You do want to make sure anti-collision light are set. Make sure your APU bleed is still on. We're going into engine start, so you want to make sure your packs are turned off. So we're going to set those packs to the off position. Do I have that in there? I do. Okay.
Please release parking brake.
Oh, my bad. I can just do it from here.
Parking brakes are released. Commencing pushback. You can start the engines in sequence.
The yaw damper turned off when I lost the power. All right, and we can start the engines in sequence. So let me try to get you guys a decent view here. What we're going to do is take our right engine, actually starting with, we're going to switch it to the ground position. Step back down here, where we want. That'll work. So here we're going to be watching the monitoring the N2% for 25%. At 25%, so there's 21, 23, 24, there's 25. Engine start, switch to idle. Such a cool airplane. All of these airplanes are cool. I mean, are there airplanes that aren't cool, really? I mean, if it flies, right? Although I have to admit, like the idea of flying an Osprey scares the hell out of me. All right, so we're going to rinse and repeat. I'm not going to zoom all the way up, but we're going to do the same thing. Left engine to ground. Monitoring for 25%. And the switch will automatically go back to the centered position once the engine is sufficiently started. There's 22%, 23%, and let's start her up. There's the left engine.
Okay, pushback completed. Please set your parking brake. Parking brake set. Parking brake set. Lowering aircraft. Ground. Startup is complete. You may disconnect. Roger. Good engine start. Clear to disconnect. See you at the side. Have a good flight. Holding position waiting for the visual. Thank you and goodbye.
Boom. Isn't that such a cool add-on? It really is. Works out so nicely. All right, and we have 2 engines that are idle and stable, so let's move back up top. We got a little bit of more homework to do. I'm actually going to bring a panel light up. I think we're going to wind up in a night flight, which works out actually kind of for a CATIII landing. It'll give us at least something here. And actually, yeah, I'll probably just leave it in live weather. I was going to set it all dark, gloomy, nasty, but I think it'd be easier to see the reference and how it's all working. But at this point, we're going to turn our probe heats on. We need to turn our Gen 1, Gen 2 on. That takes the buses off the APU and moves to the engine generators. Once you've done that, you can turn your APU off. Packs can go back to the auto position. APU bleed can be turned off. Isolation valve goes to the auto position. And everything else, I think we are good to go, my friends. Oh, and finally, left to right engine start switches go to continuous until after takeoff. And that is just for any reason if there's a failure in the engine process, we want to make sure she restarts. Now, again, if you are in icing conditions or know that you're going to be in icing conditions, now would be another good time to turn on your anti-ice for your engines and your wing if necessary. All right, stepping on back to the cockpit. We're going to go to flaps 5. So there's 1, 2, and then 5. Moving back to the transponder, we want to make sure it goes to altitude reporting off, which is the first segment. And let's get some panel lights going here. Like I said, I think we're going to wind up in a night flight. Actually, almost pause it. What are you upset about? I just realized that. I think it was just because we switched powers. Let me make sure that everything's still going fine up there. Alignment's good. And you know what? I kind of want to see. Yeah, see, now the stall shakers work. Oh, one of the stall shakers works. I have no idea what the link is to that. On the dome light, we're going to leave it on dim until after takeoff. If for any reason there's electrical power failure, your dome lights will remain on. But they're just about the only thing that will remain on. So it's good to have some sort of lighting until you're sure that you're up and clear. All right, what else do we have? I think we are all set, my friends. We have our flap set. We have the pressurization system set. We have our pack set. On the lower MD, it is good to come up here. Oops, wrong button. This button here, these 2 buttons control the lower display unit. So if we press engine, when we look down, this screen is blank. Now the reason why we do that is because if there's any cautionary alert or warning, it's going to display on this screen. So if you know that you've emptied the screen and all of a sudden you look down and you see there's something there, that's a good indicator there's something that you need to pay attention to. So it's actually a good habit to get into that. All right, other than that, let's see here. Coming back upstairs for just a moment, we're going to make sure we turn our taxi light on. And other than that, we should be good to taxi to the runway. We do want to make sure that we do so we're going to release the parking brake. And we're going to, again, push the throttles above 40%. We should not get the takeoff warning this time. Perfect. And now we're clear to taxi to our departure location. So, I really wish they would fix this whole you can't do anything while changing the camera thing. This has been around for so long. Drives me crazy. So, for example, like I'm turning, if I move the camera and I let go, the rudders keep on going until I let go of the rudders again. Like I can't make any changes to whatever it's doing at the time that I change the camera. It drives me crazy. I suppose I could just turn on my track IR, but with the bigger airliners, I find it's actually easier to operate without them. Or without it, I should say. Come on, baby. Knock it off. Let's go. There we go. Yeah, see? And that's all because of that camera crap. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to see you guys. We're just going to taxi on down to the runway at this point. And so I will see you guys at... Oh, you know what else we lost? Damn it. We need to set our V2. I thought I had already set that. That should be at 134 knots. Now you can do plus 10 if you want. And the only thing that does, that's based on the company. Man, we lost... Hang on a second. That power switch messed some things up. Let me make sure we're good. Flight directors are still on. Good, good. Flight directors on both sides. Initial altitude went back to 10,000. Should be 12,000. We do have our initial runway heading. We do have our V2. Anyway, so V2 you can do plus 10. The only thing that does is gives you a better performing takeoff. So we'll go ahead and do it today. There's no rhyme or reason for it other than it provides a better takeoff, a bit of a faster takeoff. And it's really based on the company, how that operates. So some companies do plus 5, some do plus 10, some just ride V2. Taxi speed, straight lines, 20, 25 knots. Turning speeds below 40 or above 40, 45 degrees and above should be below 10 knots. We're still, I feel like that's still pretty fast for what we're doing. Alright, and here is runway 17 right. Slow down, darling. We don't want to scare everybody. Big Mama B. There we go. Alright. Coming down the line here. Let's arm the auto throttle. We can arm LNAV. Alright, now normally you have the first officer to help you, so I do recommend setting all this up before you take the runway, but preference is yours, of course. Go ahead and set some panel lights here. Oh, not that one. Main panel. Okay. Stepping up top. Runway turn off lights on. Huh. I just realized the light bar for the landing lights is missing. I wonder if that's part of the livery. Interesting. I think it's the first time I've noticed that. I didn't have my landing switch bar, which honestly makes it a bit easier, but is what it is. Just wasn't expecting that. Okay, and finally, the last thing we do is on our transponder, set our TCAS and transponder to TARA, traffic avoidance and resolution awareness. So the aircraft will tell you that you have a traffic concern, and it will tell you what it recommends that you do. All right, spool the engines to about 50%. Make sure they're stable, no alarms. Press the little screwdriver if you don't have it mapped, or the little screw head. Put you into toga, and we are on our way. Cross-checked. Easy, baby. Gear up. I need to adjust the sensitivity of my flight yoke. Approaching flaps 1, so we're going to go to flaps 2. Trying to stay on the flight directors. We've reached our thrust reduction and acceleration altitude. So the aircraft reduces its angle of climb, allowing it to accelerate. Still flying by hand for right now. And letting the autopilot take over. We're going to go to VNav enabled, command 1 on. Aircraft is in full control. All right, let's go to flaps 1. Moving to flaps up. Monitoring your gauge right here, making sure it goes to the fully retracted position. All right. Auto brakes can be turned off. Going to move upstairs for just a minute. Engine start switches can go back to the off position now. Let's turn our wing lights on, wheel well lights, logo lights, indicating your, since we're getting ready to go into night operations here very clearly. You also want to make sure the aircraft is pressurizing. These gauges should be moving. Inside needle is internal pressure and outside needle is external pressure. What the difference is in PSI to the aircraft. All right, and other than that, I think we're just about set. We can now move to Gen 1 or Gen 2 on your voltmeter as well. We could have done that at engine start. Make sure that your fuel, is being equally consumed. You don't have an imbalance in fuel usage. That would indicate a failure maybe on one side. We've passed 10,000 feet. Landing lights can come off. Runway turnoff lights off, and taxi light can be off as well. Going dark. Let's increase our initial climb altitude up to 24,000 feet. We can also come upstairs at this point, and your seatbelt signs can move to the auto position. Change your display range as desired. I normally go to about 160 at this point. Remember, the green arc here indicates when, based on your current performance, you should reach your currently set altitude. Gives you a nice indicator of where you're at and how to project the remaining parts of your flight. The landing gear lever can come down to the off position from the up position, so we're going to set it down to off. And the only thing left to do is that transition altitude. We're going to set us up here to our transition, or our dew point. Dew point. Our altimeter to 29902, the standard, by pushing the standard button. Man, I cannot talk. Days like that are so weird, where you just like, you like malfunction. That's all, folks. Goodness gracious, I tell you what. Okay. Anyway. So at 18,000 feet, again, I will be pressing this button right here where it says standard, and that will swap the altimeter pressure back to the standard of 29902, and you will actually see a standard indicator here. We'll give it another 1,000 feet. I'll show you guys what that looks like. We're also going to go ahead and increase altitude up to our cruise altitude, and then at 30,000 feet, we'll talk again, but that will be it for a minute until we get closer to our destination. And there's 18,000. Depressing the standard button. There it is. And I'll see you guys at about 30,000 feet. We have one more thing to talk about. All right. So we are now up at 30,000 feet. The last thing that I wanted to show you guys before cruise, we're going to come right here, go to your bank angle indicator, and set it down to 10 degrees. Or bank angle limiter. And the reason why we do that is as obviously the air gets thinner and thinner, there's less air traveling over the surface of the wing of the aircraft. The more the aircraft banks, the less lift it's generating. Less air, less lift, that indicates a wing stall, and you go slipping down and scare the crap out of all your people. Now at 30,000 feet, chances are you're going to recover pretty quickly, but again, passengers, they will absolutely not enjoy that particular scenario. So make sure you guys set that, and then you'll want to set that back to 25 degrees once we pass back down through 30,000 feet on the descent. But obviously, I'll remind you. All right, my friends. So we are still about 200 miles away, give or take, and I can show you where to figure out where you are to your top of descent. We are currently 227 miles away from the TOD. Now, we have a little bit of work to do before we can set the aircraft up. Now, we have a speed restriction by default for 240 knots under 10,000 feet. I have not been able to find any documentation stating that the United States has changed from European law. The United States restriction of everything that I can find is 250 knots below 10,000 feet, but we're going to leave it as default for now, as someone commented on my YouTube channel the other day saying that in the U.S. it is 240 below 10,000. If someone can corroborate that, that would be really nice. And if you can tell me where you found the documentation to support that, that would be really helpful to me, because I've spent this entire time thinking it was 250 below 10,000. But, so we'll go ahead and leave it at 240 for now. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just going to make the approach that much easier. It's 10 less knots to worry about. So what we are going to do now is we are going to start setting up some wind information inside of the FMC here. So what we're going to do is we're going to move to the forecast page, and here we're going to enter in altitudes, and here we're going to enter in the wind directions based on those altitudes. So what I like to do is we're going to go over to our, that's the guide. You guys can tell I am following it. But we're going to go back to our SimBrief flight plan, and we're going to come here. And you can see here, these are all of our cruise altitudes, 38,000, 38,000. Okay, we're looking for the descent. So here we can see 26,000, there's 16,000, and there's 9,000 is what we'll call that. So I'm going to use those as my reference points. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in 26,000, 16,000, and 9,000, and then I'm going to enter in the wind information for each one of those altitudes, and that just makes the descent just a little bit better. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at what we've got. So we're going to turn that off. And again, the first one is going to be flight level 260. We're going to drop that in. Winding information for 260 is going to be 190 at 17. Now, if that impacts our ability to auto land on ILS 17, I'm probably going to manually change the wind inside the simulator just to keep the flight consistent, but I still want to show you guys this process. So next one is going to be 16,000. And winding information at 16,000 is going to be 197 at 33. And then finally 9,000. Oh, my bad. How about 090? There we go. 90,000 feet. And that's going to be 192 at 26. And actually, we might be able to change our approach, is what we can do here. All right, and so now we're going to hit execute here. So we've got that information. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set the outside air temperature, which for that we need the current ATIS. Now it automatically defaults to 15 degrees. So what we're going to do is we're going to set whatever the difference is. So for this, I'm just going to Google. I'm typing in KCOS MEDAR. And currently in Colorado Springs, the temperature outside is 25. So what we're going to do here for the outside air temperature is we're going to do 15. Remember, that's what it starts at, plus or minus the difference. In this case, it's plus 10 degrees. So we're going to go 10. Oh, and we also need the QNH. My fault. And current altimeter pressure is 3008. And drop that in there. And transition altitude is correct, so we don't have to worry about that. Next, we're going to move into setting up our target altitude. And how we're going to do that is we're going to go to the Navigraph chart. And this is why I always do this quite a bit ahead of time. Let's go to Colorado Springs. We're going to go for the approach. ILS 17 left. The approach plate is the same. We're looking for 10,000 feet here at Muggle. Muggle. Okay. And we're going to set that in the MCP or FCP. The aircraft, as long as we don't touch anything, what will happen is once we reach the top of descent, the aircraft will automatically begin to descend the aircraft. And it will honor any altitude restrictions that are currently in place, which I'll show you guys in the legs page here in just a minute. So we've got our altitude set. Now, for any reason you needed to descend quickly, you could either hit the altitude intervention button, or from the descent page, as long as you haven't passed the top of descent, you can hit descend now. We don't want to do that. Next, we're going to go to the fix page, and we're going to type runway 17 left. And that's going to enter in basically the threshold of the runway. And from here, what we're going to do is we're going to create guidance rings. Basically just rings giving us a visual indication on the nav display of how far we are from the runway. So we're going to do 5 miles. And I like to do a 10 mile. Okay, and you can do 15 if you choose, 20, whatever you want. And I'll show you guys what those look like as we get closer. That'll be a lot easier to display. Well, here, I can do this. Here in the guide, you can see this is what it does. It creates these rings around the airport, giving you a guidance. So we know once our aircraft passes through these rings, we're 10 miles away. And 5 miles, etc., right? And finally, our last step here is we're going to go to initial reference, and we need to set up our arrival. We're going to go flaps 30 and just double click that and drops it right where you need to be. And we're going to be looking for 131 knots on the approach. And the last thing that we need to do, well, actually 2 more things, sorry. Let's back up here, go to our nav radio. We need to set up the ILS frequency, which say is 109.1. And go ahead and transfer that over so we know that it's in the active. Again, we're not using ATC. And the final step, and this part sucks because it takes forever. No matter how I hit it, if I hold shift, not hold shift, it takes forever. We need to set the bare or the minimums. And so what we're going to do, we're going to be using, actually, this won't suck because we're using CATIII. We're simulating no visibility. So simulating CAT2, CAT3, we're going to swap this over to the radio. Come on. There we go. And we're going to set this to 200 feet. Now, I think for CAT3, it's a minimum of 50 feet. We're going to go ahead and set it for 200. And basically the idea here is by 200 feet above ground level, you should have some sort of visual reference of the airport, whether that be the initial guide lights, whether it be the landing lights or the PAPI lights, whatever it may be, some sort of indication that you have the runway in sight. Let's go ahead and bring our visual range down a little bit. So we're about now 100 miles from our top of descent. So that's really nice, because if we were on barometric, we'd have to set that to 6,387 feet, which actually tells me, by the way, excuse me, that is wrong. That should be 6,400. I just realized that. I need to make a change there. Okay. And other than that, at this point, we're just waiting for the top of descent to come along, and the aircraft will automatically begin descending for us. So I'll see you guys in a few. All right. Groovy times. So we are 2 miles right here from our top of descent. Once we reach it, the aircraft will automatically start descending because we have our altitude set. So we're just going to let her do what she wants to do. And if we go to the legs page, all right, so there we go. Retard indicates that the throttles are being pulled back. You can see that she's slowing down. She's going to slow down to a descent speed, and we have begun our descent. And going to the legs page here, here's all of our altitude restrictions: 27,000 feet, 23,000 feet, 17,000, 14,000, etc. So those are already entered. The aircraft's going to honor these at each one and descend accordingly. So it's a really smooth process. It really is. Okay, we have passed through 30,000 feet. We're now at 29,000. So at this point, remember I told you guys earlier We're going to come up and set our bank angle to 25 degrees. Let the aircraft turn as it wishes now. Alright, so we have now dropped below 18,000 feet. You can see the standard alarm is, or annunciator is alerting us. So we can just press the B key. And now the barometric pressure is set. And we're going to set that again about 10,000 feet. And I normally do it again about 5,000 feet when we're not traveling with ATC. Alright, so we are on the approach for our initial fix. This morning I'm going to set our altitude down to 7,200. This is going to be also our escape altitude in case we need to do a missed approach. We're going to make sure we set the final runway heading in on our course selectors for the VOR. It's going to be 172 degrees. We're going to be coming in on our initial fix. I'm going to start slowing the aircraft down. I'm going to get us down to about 200 knots. We're going to step upstairs, go ahead and get a head start. Turn the lights on, runway turn off lights. I'm going to go ahead and bring the nose wheel light on as well. Make sure our seatbelt signs are turned on. I rarely ever get night shots of these aircraft. It's kind of cool. Step upstairs, turn the engine start switches back to continuous. Same principle as when we were taking off. In case there's an engine failure, we want to be able to very quickly try to restart the engines. Oops, wrong button. Set our auto brakes to 3. I'm going to go ahead and arm the approach mode. So as soon as the aircraft captures the localizer, we'll begin steering onto it. The localizer is alive. The aircraft's just waiting to be in position to grab it. You can see we have the ILS frequency and the final runway heading to follow on the localizer. There's 200 knots. We're going to go ahead and go to flaps 1. Start bringing it down to 180 knots. There's our rings that we set up earlier. There's the 10 ring, there's the 5. You can see your reference speed right down here, 131 knots, 30 degrees of flaps. Alright, so we've now turned final. We're 14 miles out. Radar altimeter is starting to track. Localizer is locked. We have a reference speed and reference flaps, 30 flaps at 131 knots. Courses are set on both sides. We have our missed approach altitude set. We can actually put our heading mode in there as well, in case we have to go to heading mode. Got flaps 1 locked in at 180 knots. At 10 miles, we'll begin rapidly configuring, and we're just waiting for our glide path to lock up so we can arm the Autoland. Winds are looking good, right where they need to be. We are coming in on a headwind. 23 knots. Wow. Which means we're going to be looking at about 141-ish knots for the final reference speed. Alright, coming up on 10 miles, I'm going to go ahead and start getting us down to that reference speed. There's 140 knots locked in there. Moving to flaps 2. Moving to flaps 5. Gears coming down. Oh, wrong way. Come on. Come on, get down there. Going to flaps 10, flaps 15. Moving to flaps 25. We're still flying pretty strong. I'm going to go ahead and bring it down to 130 and go into flaps 30. Glide path is now locked up. There's the glide path diamond. So you can see we went green, pink, pink. Command B. Autoland should be functioning. Okay, guys. So we are now in very close. You can see here. We're inside 5 miles. Well, we're at 5.8. I made a couple of critical errors for the Autoland, so I want you guys to be aware of those. First off, the first step we missed, we did not arm the auto brakes. Auto brakes must be armed. Second step, we want to make sure that the ILS frequency is active in both first officer and the pilot radios. That is a requirement. Okay. Next step, you want to make sure that the course heading is existent in both first officer and pilot. You want to make sure the approach mode is then armed. Then you want to make sure that you arm also Command B once you have VOR localizer and the glide slope is at least alive. Now, hopefully the aircraft's going to correct at this point because I was a little behind schedule because I didn't catch my mistake in time. So here we go. So she's diving down to get it. Now, the good news is we are fully configured and ready for landing.
1,000.
And she is going to automatically flare or set the angle of attack very high. Once the main wheels touch down, you must make sure that you keep the aircraft in line with the runway. Although she is not descending and she should be.
Sync rate. Sync rate. Sync rate. Sync rate. Pull up. Sync rate. Minimums. Sync rate. Sync rate. Sync rate. Sync rate. 30, 20, 10.
Okay, we got lucky there. Truth be told, I should have done a go around on that one. So, real quick, guys, we're getting once again, everything else you set up like a normal ILS approach. You just need to make sure the ILS frequency is active on both pilot and first officer radio. Speed brakes are armed. Approach mode is armed. Final course heading set in both pilot and first officer course windows. And make sure that you engage Command B while Command A is active. If all those aligned and your VOR localizer and glide slope are tracking and you're in single channel, you should be fine to Autoland. So we'll definitely be doing one more video on this one, likely with an Autoland procedure, given the fact that I made that mistake. And unfortunately, I made it at too late of a time. Normally, I would have done a go around, but you know, it's getting pretty late at night, quite frankly, and I just wanted to see what would happen. So you guys saw what happened. We did come down. We came down hard. The sync rate was a bit fast. So hopefully you guys will be a bit smarter than me and catch on to that beforehand. I caught it really quick. I just knew that I caught it too late and it was going to be an issue. So that was the biggest problem. I knew what the problem was. I caught it 4 miles away. So that was a problem. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this Autoland tutorial. At the very least, we caught information. I hope it's very clear on the steps that need to be done. We will be doing another video on the 737 where we actually do the missed approach as well as the Autoland again. Look forward to that next week. Those are the two steps that we'll be covering in that particular segment. Other than that, folks, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you're interested in the full shutdown procedures, check out any of my previous 737 videos, and you will see the full shutdown, whether you want to do turnaround or all the way down to cold and dark. All right, guys, as always, enjoy your weekend. Stay safe and healthy. Happy Father's Day to all my fellow fathers out there, and I will see you guys in the next one.